In the small town of Silverton, Oregon, nestled among the towering pines and misty hills, an unease has lingered for over 2 decades. It was a place where everyone knew each other, where doors were left unlocked, and where the events of one fateful day in 2002 would forever change the fabric of the community. The story begins with Anna Mitchell, a vibrant and beloved high school teacher. Known for her infectious passion for literature and her unwavering dedication to her students, Anna was the kind of person who left an indelible mark on everyone she met. Her laughter would echo through the hallways, her lessons transcending the pages of books to touch the lives of those eager to learn. Anna had a routine, one as predictable as the seasons. Every morning she'd jog through the serene trails of Silverton Park, greeting early risers with a cheerful wave, before heading to the school to prepare for her classes. Her life was an open book, except for the pages that would abruptly end one cool autumn morning. On October 4th, 2002, Anna's usual jog took a sinister turn. The sun had barely crested the horizon when she set out, her footsteps a familiar rhythm on the dew-kissed path. But that morning, she never returned. As the hours ticked by, concern grew into panic, and the town found itself gripped by an unshakable dread. Anna's disappearance sent shockwaves through Silverton. Her friends and family, bewildered and desperate, retraced her steps, clinging to the hope that she would simply walk through the door, with a story to tell and a smile to reassure them. But as the day wore on, hope began to fade. By late afternoon, the Mitchell family made the heart-wrenching decision to contact the authorities. The 911 call that followed was a frantic plea for help, as Anna's mother struggled to maintain her composure, her voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. "Please, you have to find her," she begged. "This isn't like Anna. She wouldn't just disappear." The initial investigation yielded little more than questions and whispers. The community, once so tightly knit, was now shadowed by suspicion and unease. How could someone so cherished, so visible, simply vanish? And who, if anyone, knew more than they were letting on? As night fell over Silverton, the town was left with a chilling reality. Anna Mitchell was gone, leaving behind only memories and a growing mystery that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their peaceful existence. And so, the clock began to tick on a case that would span years, a puzzle with missing pieces that only time and an unexpected breakthrough would finally reveal. As the first light of dawn broke over Silverton on October 5th, 2002, the town awoke to a somber reality. Word of Anna Mitchell's disappearance spread quickly, and the normally bustling streets were eerily quieter. People gathered in small groups, whispering theories and fears, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the young teacher. The Silverton Police Department mobilized swiftly, but the initial response was fraught with oversight. The officers, though well-meaning, were not accustomed to handling cases of this magnitude. Silverton was a town where the most pressing crimes were petty thefts or the occasional vandalism. A missing person, especially someone as well-known and loved as Anna, was unprecedented. Within the first 48 hours, the police set up a command post at the park where Anna was last seen. Officers canvassed the area, speaking to joggers and early risers, hoping for a lead. However, the interviews yielded little more than confirming what was already known. Anna had set out on her usual route and simply vanished. Back at the Mitchell home, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of anxiety and disbelief. Anna's parents, their faces etched with worry, were surrounded by family and friends who tried to offer comfort. The phone rang incessantly, each call bringing a fresh wave of hope that was quickly dashed. "Have you heard anything?" was the refrain, met time and again with a sorrowful shake of the head. The police, under pressure to make headway, focused heavily on the park. Yet in their zeal to find answers, critical early mistakes were made. The scene was not immediately cordoned off, allowing potential evidence to be trampled underfoot by concerned locals and volunteers eager to help in the search. It was a grave oversight that would haunt the investigation for years to come. Meanwhile, key witnesses were overlooked. A local shopkeeper, who opened her store early each morning, had noticed a strange car parked near the park entrance, a detail she assumed was inconsequential until it wasn't. Her account, like several others, was not recorded until days later, by which time the vehicle was long gone, its significance buried under a mountain of missed opportunities. Inside the police station, The investigation was led by Detective Mike Harris, a seasoned officer with a reputation for diligence. Yet even he found himself overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. The pressure from the community was palpable, and every hour that passed without a breakthrough weighed heavily on his shoulders. As the second day drew to a close, Anna's friends gathered at the park, candles in hand, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing memories and prayers. The vigil was a poignant reminder of Anna's absence, a circle of light in a growing darkness. Detective Harris watched from a distance, his mind racing with unanswered questions. He knew that time was their enemy, that every passing moment without a lead diminished the chances of finding Anna alive. Yet, despite the urgency, the investigation remained stalled, hindered by its own initial missteps. And so, as night settled once more over Silverton, the town found itself caught in a limbo of fear and unanswered questions. The first 48 hours had slipped away, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty and a community on edge. Little did they know, the answers they sought were closer than they imagined, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. As dawn broke on the third day, the weight of those first 48 hours lingered heavily over Silverton. Detective Mike Harris stood at the precinct's window, staring out at the town, now shrouded in a tense silence. The urgency of finding Anna was unrelenting, yet the path forward seemed obscured by the very mistakes that had marred the initial investigation. Inside the bustling police station, officers shuffled through stacks of paperwork, their faces etched with frustration. It was amid this chaotic scene that Detective Harris received a call that would momentarily lift the fog of uncertainty. An anonymous tip from a resident who claimed to have seen a man in the park on the morning of Anna's disappearance. The caller described him as out of place, his clothes too formal for a morning stroll, his demeanor anxious. But, as with so many leads, the details were vague, and the caller had hung up before providing their name. The failure to secure the park as a potential crime scene in those crucial first hours was a mistake that loomed large. Any physical evidence that might have been present was already compromised. Detective Harris knew they needed to act swiftly on this new lead, however tenuous it seemed. He assembled a small team to canvass the area, determined to find any overlooked witnesses or clues that could breathe life into the stalled investigation. Meanwhile, Anna's family remained in a state of suspended grief. Her mother, Ellen, barely slept, clinging to the hope that her daughter would walk through the door at any moment. Her father, Robert, channeled his anguish into action, organizing search parties and coordinating with local media to keep Anna's story alive and in the public eye. Back at the precinct, the detectives' team returned with little to show for their efforts. Frustration mounted as the hours continued to pass without significant progress. Yet, amidst the disappointment, a small breakthrough emerged. One of the officers had managed to track down the shopkeeper who had seen the strange car. Her recollection, though not recorded initially, provided a sliver of insight. A license plate partially memorized, a color, a make. Detective Harris seized upon this new information, a flicker of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. He instructed his team to cross-reference the details with local vehicle registrations, knowing that even the smallest discrepancy could lead them to Anna's whereabouts. As the day wore on, the town of Silverton remained on edge, each resident acutely aware of the ticking clock. In living rooms and cafes, hushed conversations speculated about the mysterious man in the park and the strange car. Theories abounded, each one more implausible than the last, yet all born from the same desperate desire for answers. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the search for Anna continued with renewed vigor. The mistakes of the past haunted every step, but in the quiet determination of those seeking the truth, there was a sense that the tide might yet turn. For hidden within the shadows of uncertainty lay the key to unlocking the mystery, a truth waiting to emerge, just out of reach, as the town held its collective breath. With the clock ticking into the second night since Anna's disappearance, the urgency in Silverton was palpable. Detective Harris, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities and half-formed theories, knew that the first 48 hours were crucial. Yet as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that missteps had already been made. The initial police response had been swift but flawed. Officers had rushed to secure the park where Anna was last seen, setting up a perimeter and beginning a rudimentary search. But in their haste, crucial evidence was overlooked. Footprints near the edge of the park, leading into the woods, were trampled before they could be properly examined. A discarded water bottle, potentially holding fingerprints, had been casually kicked aside, its significance lost amidst the chaos. Witnesses, too, were a mixed blessing. The park had been busy that afternoon, a tapestry of families and joggers, any of whom might have seen something. Yet, in the confusion, their accounts blurred together. Descriptions of the mysterious man varied wildly. Some said he was tall, others swore he was average height. His clothes, his hair color, his demeanor, all details were maddeningly inconsistent, a kaleidoscope of impressions that offered little concrete direction. Anna's family, meanwhile, found themselves in an agonizing limbo. Ellen, her maternal instincts screaming for action, grew frustrated with the lack of progress. She spent her days at the precinct, demanding updates, her presence a constant reminder of the stakes. Robert, ever the pragmatist, took to the streets with posters, his resolve a beacon of hope to the volunteers who joined him. The press, sensing the community's desperation, descended upon Silverton, their cameras and microphones capturing every tearful plea and every anguished cry. Yet, even as Anna's face became a fixture on television screens, the investigation felt like it was stalling. Back at the precinct, Detective Harris faced a critical decision. The partial license plate, though tantalizing, had yet to yield results. His team, overworked and under pressure, struggled to filter through the sheer volume of data. It was during one of these long, frustrating nights that a young officer, fresh out of the academy and eager to prove herself, suggested a new approach. What if the strange car hadn't been local? What if it had come from outside Silverton, its owner confident that their anonymity would protect them? The idea sparked a flurry of new queries, expanding the search parameters to neighboring counties, states, even beyond. The family, grappling with their own fears and frustrations, turned inward for strength. Ellen and Robert, though exhausted, found solace in their shared memories of Anna, their conversations a mix of hope and heartache. They resolved to keep their daughter's spirit alive, to fight for her with every fiber of their being. As the investigation entered its third day, the town's anxiety deepened. Questions lingered, unanswered and unsettling. Would the breakthrough they so desperately needed come in time? Or would Anna's smile become just another memory, a phantom haunting Silverton's collective consciousness? The sun rose on another day of uncertainty, casting long shadows over the town, shadows that mirrored the doubts and fears in every heart. But within those shadows lay potential for redemption, for justice, for answers. As the detectives regrouped, one question loomed larger than all others. Who was the man in the park, and where had he taken Anna? The answer, they prayed, lay just beyond their reach, waiting to be uncovered. The town was caught in a twilight of anticipation and fear. Detective Harris, though seasoned, felt the weight of each passing hour with no progress. The precinct buzzed with activity, yet it seemed they were chasing shadows. The partial license plate was a whisper in the wind, leading them into a labyrinth of dead ends and false hope. In the hushed corners of Silverton, whispers began to rise. Rumors spread like wildfire, igniting suspicion and speculation. Some spoke of a drifter spotted near the park days before Anna's disappearance, a man whose face no one could quite recall, but whose presence now seemed sinister in retrospect. Others pointed fingers at newcomers in town, strangers who had recently arrived under the guise of work or family visits. The investigation, once a beacon of hope, started to falter under the weight of misinformation. Leads were pursued with fervor, only to dissolve under scrutiny. One by one, potential suspects were brought in for questioning. A local mechanic with a troubled past, a reclusive artist whose peculiar habits had always set tongues wagging, and even a high school teacher whose alibi, though solid, was dissected with relentless vigor. Each interrogation ended the same, a mix of frustration and relief as they were cleared. Yet the void of answers remained. The detectives' determination was unwavering, but in private, their confidence waned. The realization that they might be looking in the wrong direction gnawed at them, the clock ticking louder in the silence of their doubts. The media, relentless in their pursuit for a story, began to shift focus. Headlines speculated on the competency of the investigation, the community's trust in law enforcement slowly eroding. In homes across Silverton, Families locked their doors tighter, fear settling in like an unwelcome guest. For Ellen and Robert, each day was a battle against despair. Their home, once filled with laughter, echoed with emptiness. They clung to each other and to the hope that Anna would return, yet the solitude of their grief was suffocating. They found themselves at odds with the growing skepticism around them, choosing to believe in the goodness of their community, even as doubt crept in. As the days turned into weeks, the case began to cool. The fervor of the initial search gave way to a somber acceptance that Anna's disappearance might remain a mystery. Detective Harris, though outwardly stoic, was haunted by the case. He replayed every detail in his mind, searching for the missed connection, the overlooked clue that could reignite their pursuit. In the quiet of the precinct, he stood before a wall of Anna's photographs and notes, each one a testament to a life interrupted. He knew the answers were there, buried beneath layers of misdirection and half-truths. But for now they remained elusive, just out of reach, as the town of Silverton held its breath, waiting for a breakthrough that seemed less certain with each passing day. And yet, in the midst of this uncertainty, a silent resolve began to take root. The truth, though obscured, was out there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The question that hung in the air was simple, yet profound. How long could secrets remain hidden before the light of justice finally shone through? As the days stretched into months, Silverton's once vibrant streets were haunted by whispers and speculative glances. The investigation had hit a wall, and the vacuum left by answers was quickly filled with rumors and unfounded theories. Some pointed fingers at Anna's friends, scrutinizing their every move with suspicion, while others murmured about strangers spotted in the neighborhood around the time of her disappearance. In the quiet corners of the local diner and the pews of the town church, names were spoken in hushed tones. Among them was that of Kyle Bennett, a local handyman with a penchant for solitude and a past that intrigued gossipers. Kyle, who had once fixed a leaky pipe in the Johnsons' basement, became the town's favorite suspect du jour, not for any concrete evidence, but because his reclusiveness fit the mold of a man with something to hide. Detective Harris, feeling the pressure to act, followed these leads with a mix of hope and skepticism. Kyle was brought in for questioning, his demeanor a mix of bewilderment and irritation. He recounted his day-to-day routine, offering alibis that, while shaky, were corroborated by a few neighbors. Yet, the lack of any physical evidence linking him to Anna's disappearance left Harris at an impasse. The scrutiny, however, left a taint on Kyle's reputation that would linger far beyond the investigation. Meanwhile, Ellen and Robert found themselves ensnared in a cycle of hope and despair. They attended community meetings, desperately seeking solidarity and answers, but often leaving more isolated than before. Their grief, once a private affair, had become a public spectacle, analyzed and judged by those who claimed to know the truth. The case files grew thicker, yet the stack of unanswered questions grew taller. Each lead seemed to fizzle into nothingness, and the once fervent energy of the investigation was slowly extinguished by the passage of time and the stubbornness of silence. Without fresh evidence or a confession, the investigation began to stall, like a car stuck in mud, wheels spinning but going nowhere. In the heart of Silverton, life continued with a semblance of normalcy. New families moved in, old ones moved on, but the shadow of Anna's disappearance lingered like a ghost. Detective Harris, though weary, refused to relinquish the case to the annals of the unsolved. He spent long nights poring over every detail, convinced that the key was hidden in plain sight, obscured by the chaos of human error and the fog of misinformation. But as the seasons changed, so too did the town's focus. Other stories emerged, other crises demanded attention. The urgency of Anna's case dissipated, leaving behind a cold, aching void. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet determination persisted. Silverton had not forgotten, and neither had Harris. The truth, like a seed, lay dormant, waiting for the right conditions to burst forth. As the first anniversary of Anna's disappearance loomed, a pall settled over the community. Ellen and Robert prepared for the day with heavy hearts, unaware that the winds of change were beginning to stir. Unknown to them, an unexpected letter was about to arrive, its contents poised to reignite the investigation and bring the light of hope back to the heart of Silverton. The morning of the anniversary dawned with a somber stillness. Ellen and Robert sat at their kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken grief and anticipation. A gentle knock interrupted their silence, and Ellen rose to find a letter slipped under their door. She picked it up, her hands trembling as she recognized the handwriting. An anonymous tipster claiming to know the truth about Anna's disappearance. Detective Harris, ever vigilant despite the dwindling momentum, examined the letter with cautious optimism. The note was cryptic, hinting at a person named Jake, someone from Anna's past who might have harbored a secret grudge. Harris, driven by the need to explore every possible angle, began to dig into Anna's connections, hoping to unearth something substantial. The name Jake was not unfamiliar to the residents of Silverton. Rumors swirled about a troubled young man who had recently left town under mysterious circumstances. The gossip mill churned with theories. Some believed Jake had been involved in illegal activities, while others whispered of a secret relationship with Anna. Harris, however, remained skeptical, knowing too well how easily speculation could distort the truth. In the following days, Harris interviewed those who had known Jake. Friends described him as a drifter, someone who never quite fit in, but didn't seem capable of harm. Yet inconsistencies in their stories painted a murky portrait. One friend recalled Jake becoming increasingly agitated in the weeks leading up to Anna's disappearance, often seen arguing with her at the edge of the school grounds. Despite these leads, the investigation hit a wall. Jake's whereabouts were unknown, and without concrete evidence, Harris's efforts felt like chasing shadows. The town, hungry for closure, latched onto the narrative, and Jake became the prime suspect in the court of public opinion. The pressure mounted on Harris to deliver results, but the truth remained elusive. Meanwhile, the community's focus began to shift. With no new developments, interest waned, and the whispers about Jake slowly faded. Silverton's residents returned to their routines, leaving behind the haunting echoes of what might have been. For Ellen and Robert, however, every day without answers was an eternity. As summer turned to fall, the case grew cold. The files were filed away, and the energy of the investigation dissipated like mist in the morning sun. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet determination lingered. Harris, though weary, refused to abandon the case. He believed fervently that the truth was within reach, hiding in the intricate web of the town's secrets and lies. Unbeknownst to all, a breakthrough was on the horizon, one that would emerge from an unexpected source and shatter the fragile calm that had settled over Silverton. The seeds of truth, long dormant, were about to sprout in the most unlikely of places. The question remained, would Harris and the town be ready to confront the reality that awaited them? The stage was set for a revelation that would change everything. Years passed, and the laughter that once filled the Evans home was replaced by a profound, echoing silence. Ellen and Robert, their lives frozen in that fateful year of 2002, found themselves trapped in a perpetual cycle of hope and despair. Every anniversary of Anna's disappearance brought renewed pain, a stark reminder of their unanswered prayers. Ellen poured herself into the search for answers. She transformed their living room into a makeshift command center, walls plastered with newspaper clippings and timelines meticulously drawn across maps of Silverton. She combed through every word, every rumor, desperately seeking the thread that could unravel the mystery. Robert, once a man of few words, became even more withdrawn, his grief manifesting in long walks alone through the woods where Anna used to play. The town of Silverton, however, moved on. New families moved in, children grew into teenagers, and the once vibrant story of Anna Evans became a cautionary tale, whispered on windy nights. A new generation emerged, one that only knew of Anna through faded pictures on community bulletin boards. The case, once the heart of Silverton's collective consciousness, now gathered dust, tucked away in the recesses of the local police department. Harris, who had retired several years after the investigation grew cold, never truly let go. He remained a fixture at the local diner, where he and a group of old-timers would gather, sipping coffee and reminiscing about the town's bygone days. His mind, however, was always on Anna. He revisited the case files regularly, stubbornly refusing to accept that the truth could remain buried. In their solitude, Ellen and Robert found unexpected allies in the form of an online community dedicated to unsolved mysteries. Here they connected with amateur sleuths and retired detectives across the country who shared their obsession. Together, They re-examined evidence, scoured databases, and revisited every testimony from the past. Theories were built and dismantled, each failure a bitter pill swallowed with the hope that the next lead would be the one to break the case wide open. As the years turned into decades, technology advanced, and with it, the tools available to those who still cared. The rise of genetic genealogy offered a new avenue, a glimmer of hope in a long, dark tunnel. Ellen, ever the guardian of Anna's memory, submitted a sample of Anna's DNA to an online database, a silent plea to the universe for closure. The seeds of truth, though dormant, were indeed sprouting. The DNA, once a static piece of the puzzle, began to weave its way through the complex tapestry of familial connections. Unknown to Ellen and Robert, a match was found, a distant cousin who had submitted their own DNA in search of ancestral roots. This connection, invisible to the eye, was a thread pulling its way through the labyrinth, inching closer to the heart of the mystery. The stage was set for an extraordinary revelation. The quiet corridors of the Silverton Police Department, untouched by the passage of time, would soon echo with the footsteps of those seeking justice. And as the Evans family clung to the thinnest strands of hope, destiny was quietly rearranging the pieces, preparing to illuminate the shadows that had long shrouded the truth. In the quietude of Silverton, life continued its unhurried pace, unaware of the seismic shifts happening beneath the surface. Ellen and Robert Evans, now greyed by time but not weakened by it, maintained their vigil. The seasons changed, marked by the gentle rustling of leaves and the soft fall of snow, but their resolve remained steadfast. Anna's room, preserved like a museum of lost innocence, was a testament to their undying hope. Years slipped by, and the town, once vibrant with the energy of youth, aged alongside them. New families moved in, unaware of the spectre that lingered in the community's collective memory. The Evans struggle had become a whispered legend, a story told in hushed tones to curious newcomers by those who remembered. Amidst this backdrop, the Evans' personal investigation continued, quietly fueled by the connections they forged online. The group of amateur detectives and retired law enforcement officers had become their lifeline, a digital family bound by the shared purpose of uncovering the truth. Together, they dissected the minutiae of the case, reanalyzing forensic reports and reimagining timelines with the fervor only the truly devoted could muster. It was during one of these late-night sessions, the glow of the computer screen casting a faint light in their living room, that a message pinged into Ellen's inbox. A name, previously unknown, now linked to Anna through the complex web of DNA. She stared at the screen, heart pounding, the significance of the discovery not yet fully sinking in. This distant cousin, living states away, had unwittingly opened a door long thought sealed. The realization was a slow burn, spreading through their community of sleuths with electrifying speed. A match had been found, and with it, the possibility of answers. Ellen and Robert, buoyed by this development, felt a resurgence of hope, fragile, yet tenacious. Meanwhile, in the town's heart, conversations began to shift. The name Evans, once an echo of sorrow, started to resurface. The local diner buzzed with speculation as patrons pieced together snippets of information, their curiosity piqued by the renewed interest in an old story. Whispers spread of a breakthrough, an impending revelation that could shake Silverton's foundations. As the Evans family braced themselves for what lay ahead, they were acutely aware of the stakes. This was their moment, the time when years of heartache and perseverance might finally yield the truth. Yet as the truth edged closer, so did the shadows of doubt and fear. What if the answers were not what they hoped? What if, after all these years, the truth was more painful than the mystery? But doubt could not dissuade them. The seeds of hope had taken root, and the Evans family, together with their newfound allies, were ready to face whatever lay ahead. They knew that the past, though buried deep, was beginning to stir, and soon the quiet corridors of justice would once again hum with the pursuit of truth. The clock ticked towards an inevitable confrontation, and the town of Silverton, poised on the brink of revelation, held its breath. The name Evans once again whispered through Silverton's streets, and Ellen and Robert found themselves at the heart of a storm they had both longed for and feared. The years of silence had been an unending purgatory. Every holiday, every birthday, every anniversary of Anna's disappearance marked by an absence that was both profound and suffocating. The threads of their lives had been woven tightly around this loss, and the waiting had become a second skin. The town had changed around them, new families moving in, old ones fading away. But the unsolved mystery of Anna Evans remained a stubborn ghost. At community events, there was always a moment, a pause, where the conversation would inevitably turn to the Evans case. Yet over time, those moments grew shorter, the interest waned, and the whispers faded into the background noise of everyday life. Ellen never stopped searching, though. While the world moved on, she doggedly pursued every lead, no matter how thin. She became well-versed in the intricacies of DNA technology, joining online forums and attending seminars, her determination fueled by a mixture of hope and desperation. Robert, though equally committed, found solace in more tangible pursuits. He organized annual runs in Anna's honor, raising awareness and funds to keep the case alive in both hearts and records. Their private investigation was painstakingly slow, each lead often dissolving into disappointment. They hired a series of private detectives, each promising the breakthrough that never came. Still, they pressed on, driven by an unyielding belief that Anna's story was not yet fully told. During these years, the Evans family found allies in unexpected places. Other families touched by tragedy reached out, forming a network of support and shared knowledge. They became part of a broader community, a tapestry of grief and resilience, where stories were swapped and strategies shared over late-night phone calls and coffee shop meetings. Silverton, too, had its share of dark secrets. Over the years, other cases emerged. Some solved, others equally mysterious. The town learned to mourn and then move on, but for the Evans, moving on was never an option. Their home became a shrine to Anna, filled with photos and memories, a testament to a life interrupted. With each passing year, the weight of the unsolved case bore down on the town's consciousness. Some residents, now older and wiser, began to question the initial investigation's integrity. Rumors of overlooked evidence and missed opportunities fueled local gossip, but without concrete leads, the case remained cold. As Ellen and Robert stared at the name on the screen, they felt the gravity of those lost years. The silence had been deafening, but now, with a potential link finally in hand, the silence was on the verge of breaking. The possibility of truth, of finally understanding what had happened to their daughter, loomed large. In the days that followed, the Evans family, alongside their community of supporters, prepared for what was to come. The name, connected through a distant relative's DNA test, offered a tantalizing clue, one that promised to unravel the mystery that had gripped them for so long. But with answers came uncertainty. Who was this person that shared a fragment of Anna's genetic history? And more importantly, what did they know about that fateful day in 2002? As the pieces began to align, the Evans family braced themselves for the answers they had sought for so long, aware that the truth could bring its own kind of reckoning. The town of Silverton, once again on the cusp of a revelation, found itself holding its collective breath as the clock ticked toward an inevitable confrontation with the past. For years, the Evans family had lived in a world defined by waiting. With every passing anniversary of Anna's disappearance, the pain gnawed deeper into their hearts. Silverton's seasons changed, children grew up, and new families moved into town, unaware of the shadow that lingered over this seemingly idyllic place. Ellen Evans often found herself walking the same paths Anna had once taken: the school route, the park, the little corner store where Anna would buy candy with her allowance. Every step was a reminder, both bitter and sweet, of the daughter she had lost. Robert, meanwhile, threw himself into his work, finding solace in routine, yet every quiet moment threatened to unravel him. Their home, once filled with laughter, was now a sanctuary of memory and mourning. Anna's room remained untouched, a time capsule of her teenage years. The Evans were not alone in their grief. Friends and neighbors, who once rallied around them, had slowly returned to their own lives. The community's initial fervor, the vigils, the search parties, had faded, leaving only whispers of the past. Yet, the unsolved mystery of Anna's disappearance lingered in the collective consciousness, a nagging reminder of a darkness that could visit anyone, anywhere. In those silent years, Ellen became an amateur detective. She devoured books on cold cases, forensic science, and investigative techniques. Her nights were spent poring over the case files, obtained through freedom of information requests, and she learned to navigate the labyrinth of legal jargon and police procedure. Robert supported her efforts, though he feared the toll it took on her spirit. Their private investigation, though fueled by desperation, yielded little. Promising leads fizzled out, and potential witnesses moved away or faded into obscurity. The couple even hired private investigators, but their reports only added to the pile of unfulfilled hopes. Each dead end was a reminder of their helplessness, yet Ellen refused to give up. She knew that somewhere, in the vast puzzle, lay the key to Anna's fate. The town of Silverton, meanwhile, continued to evolve. New businesses opened, schools expanded, and life, as it does, moved on. But the Evans family remained frozen in time. Ellen and Robert were fixtures in the community, respected, yes, but also pitied. They attended town meetings, participated in local events, always with a sense of being on the outside looking in. To them, every cheerful gathering was tinged with the absence of their daughter. Then, years later, technology caught up with their hope. The advent of advanced DNA testing and genealogy databases offered a new avenue, one Ellen had read about with cautious optimism. When a distant relative decided to upload their genetic information to an ancestry website, it sparked a series of events that would reignite the long cold case. The Evanses were suddenly back in the fray, thrust from their years of solitude into a whirlwind of renewed investigation. The name on the screen, a distant cousin of someone who might have known Anna, was their first real lead in over a decade. It was a fragile connection, but it was something. Silverton buzzed with anticipation, a town on the brink of rediscovery. The Evans family, alongside old friends and newfound allies, prepared to face the truth that had eluded them for so long. As the days passed, the potential for closure loomed larger, yet with it came the fear of what the truth might reveal. As Ellen and Robert sat in their living room, surrounded by photos of Anna, they held on to each other. The silence that had once been their enemy now felt like a friend, a momentary calm before the storm of revelation that awaited them. The past was catching up, and with it, the hope that justice, at long last, might be within reach. The quiet of the Evans living room was shattered by the ringing phone. Ellen reached for it, her hand trembling slightly, the anticipation and anxiety a familiar yet unwelcome sensation. On the other end was Detective Sarah Mitchell, a name that had become synonymous with persistence and tenacity since she took over the case just months prior. A new generation of detectives, she was known for her unconventional methods and determination to solve the unsolvable. Detective Mitchell's voice was steady, offering a reassurance Ellen desperately needed. "Ellen, I have some promising news. We've identified a potential match from the genealogy database. It's preliminary, but it's the strongest lead we've had in years." Ellen felt a surge of hope, tempered by the caution she'd learned to embrace. "What does this mean? How close are we?" Mitchell explained how the genetic genealogy had led them to a particular family line, one that intersected with Silverton's own history, a lineage that, on its branches, bore the weight of secrets long buried. "It means, Ellen, that we might finally know who was connected to Anna's disappearance. We're looking at someone who was in Silverton at the time, someone who blended in." The revelation was electrifying. Ellen, her voice barely a whisper, asked the question that had haunted her for years. "Do you think they knew her? Was it someone she trusted?" The detective hesitated, the gravity of the situation heavy in her response. "That's what we're trying to determine, and why we need to move carefully. We're examining connections, seeing who within this family had ties to Anna." As Ellen hung up, a rush of emotions cascaded over her. Relief, fear, and a cautious optimism intermingled. Robert, sensing the change in his wife's demeanor, looked at her expectantly. What did she say? Ellen relayed the conversation, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "They're getting closer, Robert, closer than ever before." Across town, Detective Mitchell sat at her desk, papers and digital files spread out before her like a map of a long-forgotten war. Each piece of evidence, each name and date, a potential key to unlocking the truth. She knew the implications of this discovery, how it could shake the very foundation of Silverton, a town built on shared histories and hidden pasts. The application of genetic genealogy had breathed new life into the case, but with it came a labyrinth of relationships and secrets. Mitchell and her team worked tirelessly, sifting through decades of records, piecing together a picture of a suspect who might have been overlooked amid the noise of the past. The town, meanwhile, was a cauldron of speculation. Rumors spread like wildfire, each person trying to guess who among them could have harbored such darkness. Old wounds reopened, friendships tested under the strain of suspicion. In a small house on the outskirts of Silverton, an elderly woman sat alone, clutching a photograph. Her eyes were pools of regret, memories flickering across her mind like faded photographs. She knew the time had come to speak, to unburden her soul of the secret she had kept for far too long. As the first light of dawn touched the town, the promise of resolution lingered in the air, a testament to the relentless passage of time and truth. The narrative was shifting, the pieces aligning, and soon, Silverton would face a truth it could never have imagined. Detective Mitchell's fingertips grazed the edges of the papers scattered across her desk. She could feel the weight of each potential lead, each unanswered question pressing down on her. But there was something different now, a spark, a glimmer of hope. The application of genetic genealogy had provided them with a new angle, a fresh perspective on a case that had grown cold with the passing years. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was her colleague, Detective Harris, who had been her steadfast partner through the complexities of this investigation. His expression was a mixture of excitement and urgency. "They've got something," he announced, his voice barely concealing his anticipation. "The lab called. The new tech, it's working. They found a match." Mitchell's heart leaped. "A match? To what?" "To one of the old samples we submitted. It links back to a family with connections to Silverton. You remember the old Jenkins farm?" Mitchell nodded, her mind racing through the dusty corridors of past interviews and forgotten histories. The Jenkins family had been prominent in Silverton once, but their presence had faded over the decades. "I do." "But they moved away years ago, didn't they?" "Most of them, yes. But there's one member who stayed, Carl Jenkins. He's been here all along, blending in, keeping a low profile." Mitchell's mind whirred with possibilities. Carl Jenkins, a name that had never been on their radar. The implications were staggering. "Do we have enough for a warrant?" Harris nodded. "The DNA match gives us probable cause. We can bring him in for questioning." As they prepared to make the arrest, the town of Silverton buzzed with the news of a breakthrough. Whispers floated through the streets, speculation mingling with the morning mist. The closer they seemed to get to the truth, the more palpable the tension grew, like a storm gathering strength. Meanwhile, in her small, dimly lit living room, the elderly woman clutched the photograph tighter, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. She knew her time was running short, each breath a reminder of the fragility of life. The photograph, a faded snapshot of a happier time, was her last connection to a past she could never quite leave behind. She picked up the phone, her hands trembling, and dialed a number she had hoped never to call. It was time to share her burden, to reveal the secret that had weighed heavily on her heart for so many years. The truth was finally ready to come to light, and she would be the one to set it free. As the day unfolded, Detective Mitchell and her team approached the Jenkins residence with caution. The air was thick with anticipation, every step a reminder of the gravity of their mission. Inside, Carl Jenkins sat at his kitchen table, oblivious to the storm about to engulf him. The knock on his door would be the beginning of the end, a revelation that would ripple through Silverton, unearthing truths long buried beneath layers of silence. The pieces of the puzzle were finally aligning, and the truth was closer than ever. But with it came the looming question. What other secrets lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered? The town braced itself for the answer, each resident clinging to their own hopes and fears as the story of Anna's disappearance hurtled toward its long-awaited resolution. The knock echoed through the Jenkins residence, a sound that seemed to reverberate with the weight of history. Carl Jenkins glanced up from his coffee, eyebrows knitting in confusion. He stood slowly, the scrape of his chair against the floor marking the beginning of an unexpected chapter. Before he reached the door, Detective Mitchell and her team were already inside, their presence authoritative, yet filled with an air of empathy. It was a delicate balance they had to maintain, firm enough to extract the truth, gentle enough to handle the fragility of human emotion. Carl, with a mix of resignation and bewilderment, met their eyes. He could sense the gravity of the moment, an unspoken understanding that this was no ordinary visit. Meanwhile, across town, the elderly woman sat in her living room, phone still cradled in her hand. Her heart raced as she relayed the details, a truth she had held onto for decades, one that had festered in the shadows of her conscience. As her voice trembled through the line, the listener on the other end, a young detective named Harper, took copious notes, her mind racing with the implications of the confession. Detective Harper, a recent addition to the Silverton Police Department, had been tasked with re-examining cold cases through the lens of new forensic technologies. Genetic genealogy, a revolutionary tool in modern investigations, was her specialty. She knew this was more than just another case. It was a chance to bring closure to a town haunted by the past. The call ended, leaving the elderly woman in silence, a bittersweet relief washing over her. She had done her part. Now it was up to the investigators to piece together the rest. Back at the Jenkins residence, Detective Mitchell began her questioning. Carl's demeanor shifted from confusion to guardedness. He answered the questions with the rehearsed ease of someone who had long believed the past to be buried. But there was something different in the air today, a sense that the past was no longer content to stay hidden. Detective Harper arrived at the station, her mind buzzing with the details of the confession. She immediately set to work, accessing old case files and cross-referencing them with the new insights. The pieces began to fit together in a way they never had before. The photograph the elderly woman had mentioned, a crucial link in the chain of events, suddenly held a new significance. With access to cutting-edge genetic genealogy tools, Harper was able to identify familial matches from DNA samples collected but never fully analyzed. The results were startling, leading to connections that had been obscured by time and oversight. As the day wore on, the storm clouds gathered over Silverton, both literally and metaphorically. The evidence mounted, each discovery a step closer to the truth that had eluded them for so long. Detective Mitchell, sensing the shift, pressed Carl harder, her questions probing the inconsistencies that had previously gone unnoticed. The tension in the room was palpable, a silent battle of wills that would determine the course of their investigation. And then, just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows, Carl's facade began to crack. It was a small detail, a slip of the tongue, but it was enough. Mitchell seized the moment, her voice firm yet compassionate. The air was thick with anticipation, each word hanging in the balance. As Carl's defenses crumbled, the truth began to spill forth, a confession long overdue. But as the words filled the room, another question lingered. What more was there to uncover, hidden in the depths of this small town's history? The story was far from over, and as Silverton braced itself for the revelations to come, one thing was clear. The truth would not be silenced, and the past would no longer be ignored. Detective Harper leaned back in her chair, the weight of Carl's confession heavy in the air. Yet, beneath the surface, a current of urgency pulsed. There was more to unravel, more to understand. She knew that the truth often lay tangled within the mundane details, and it was these details that could lead them to the unthinkable. The DNA results arrived, a digital envelope that held the promise of answers. Harper clicked it open, her eyes scanning the lines of data that unfolded before her. The matches were undeniable, familial connections that pointed to a history intertwined with the town's own. Yet one name stood out, a ghost in the lineage that demanded attention. With a deep breath, she called in the genetic genealogist who had been assisting with the case. Together, they pored over the family tree, tracing branches that twisted and turned through generations. The revelations were staggering, a web of relationships that had gone unnoticed, obscured by the passage of time and the silence of those who knew. A name emerged, one that had never been considered a suspect. It was someone who had lived quietly, blending into the fabric of the community, unnoticed yet always present. The genealogist spoke, her voice a mixture of disbelief and certainty. This individual, a local figure known for their community involvement, had been overlooked during the initial investigation. Their connection to the victim was tenuous at best, but the genetic links were undeniable. Harper felt a chill run down her spine, a killer in plain sight, shielded by the very community they had betrayed. As the rain began to fall outside, the genealogist explained the intricacies of genetic markers, how they could trace lineage and reveal hidden truths. Harper listened intently, her mind racing through the implications. Each new fact was a puzzle piece falling into place, creating a picture that was both shocking and undeniable. Back in the interrogation room, Detective Mitchell continued her questioning, her focus unwavering. Carl, now visibly shaken, began to unravel further. He revealed snippets of conversations, whispers of secrets long kept, and as he spoke, the name that Harper had uncovered echoed in the room, a shared understanding passing between the detectives. The breakthrough was there, a culmination of science, persistence, and the relentless pursuit of justice. But as the truth loomed large, so did the question of how the town would react when the veil was finally lifted. The identity of the suspect, a trusted member of the community, would send shockwaves through Silverton. As the storm raged outside, Harper knew they were on the brink of a revelation that would change everything. But she also knew that with each answer, new questions would arise, probing deeper into the heart of the mystery that had haunted them for so long. The pieces were coming together, but the story was not yet complete. They were on the edge of discovery, standing at the precipice of truth, and as the night wore on, the anticipation of what was to come hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, a constant reminder of time slipping away. Harper stood, her eyes fixed on the genealogist's report spread across the table, each line a thread leading them closer to the truth. The air was thick with anticipation, the storm outside mirroring the brewing storm within the room. Harper turned to Detective Mitchell, her voice steady despite the gravity of their discovery. They needed more than just science. They needed a confession. But first they had to ensure they hadn't overlooked anything. The genetic web they untangled had led them to a prominent figure, a person with a pristine public facade, yet now tied to the crime through irrefutable DNA evidence. Mitchell nodded, her mind racing through the logistics. They had the DNA match, but corroborating evidence was crucial. Every move had to be meticulous. There was no room for error. The last thing they wanted was for this breakthrough to slip through their fingers due to a procedural misstep. Harper recalled the victim's family, their years of anguish and unanswered questions. This was for them, for the peace they deserved, and for the community that had been unknowingly harboring a killer. The door creaked open, and Carl re-entered, his face pale. He had been briefed on the developments, and the weight of the revelation seemed to press down on him. Harper met his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation, but there was none. Instead, there was a shared determination to see this through. They decided to review the suspect's history, searching for any overlooked connections. Harper sifted through old newspaper clippings and community records, noting every event the suspect had attended, every speech given, every interaction logged. The suspect had been a pillar of the community, their actions over the years now painted in a sinister light. Then, among the files, Harper found something, a small note, seemingly insignificant at first. It was a receipt, dated the day after the victim's disappearance, for a cleaning service. The address listed was an unassuming storage unit on the outskirts of town. It was a lead, thin but potentially pivotal. Mitchell, sensing the potential breakthrough, instructed a team to investigate immediately. The storm outside showed no signs of abating, the winds howling as if protesting the revelation soon to come. As they prepared to leave, Harper felt a renewed sense of urgency. They were close, closer than ever. The drive to the storage facility was tense, the silence in the car punctuated only by the rhythmic thud of the windshield wipers. Harper's mind raced, contemplating the implications of their find. If the storage unit held what they suspected, it could provide the tangible link they needed to secure a conviction. As they arrived, the facility stood eerily silent, the rain pounding on the metal roofs like a relentless drumbeat. They approached the unit cautiously, the key in Harper's hand feeling heavy with the weight of impending truth. With bated breath, they unlocked the door and swung it open, the dim light revealing a neatly arranged but unsettling scene. Boxes lined the walls, each meticulously labeled. But it was the center of the room that drew their attention, a tarp-covered object, ominously silent under the flickering fluorescent lights. The truth was within reach, the breakthrough finally tangible. But as Harper stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, she knew that the next few moments would be critical. The layers of deception were about to be peeled away, revealing a reality that would forever alter the fabric of their small town. And as the storm continued its violent dance outside, Harper understood that they were standing on the threshold of a revelation, a moment that would demand justice, resilience, and perhaps forgiveness. With the tarp before them, a shiver ran down Harper's spine. She hesitated for a heartbeat, acutely aware that what lay beneath could change everything. Mitchell gave a nod, steadying the atmosphere with a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the moment. As Harper pulled back the tarp, the scene revealed itself with chilling clarity. A set of meticulously organized tools lay atop a stained sheet, their arrangement almost ceremonial. It was the kind of precision that spoke of a methodical mind, one that thrived on control and detail. But it was the dark, dried stains that drew her eye, a haunting reminder of the violence that had transpired. Beside the tools sat a small, inconspicuous box. Harper opened it, her breath catching as she saw its contents, a collection of personal items belonging unmistakably to the victim. Jewelry, a worn diary, and, most damningly, a wallet with identification still inside. It was undeniable evidence, tethering this place to that fateful disappearance. Mitchell and Harper exchanged a glance, the enormity of their find settling heavily between them. But there was more work to be done. The forensic team, summoned with urgency, arrived swiftly, their presence an indication of the seriousness with which this investigation had transformed. As the team began their meticulous sweep of the unit, Harper's mind raced back to the DNA results that had arrived just days earlier. It was a painstaking match that had, until now, lacked a context. A single hair found at the victim's last known location. The forensic analyst had been cautious, but the match was undeniable. A relative of the prime suspect, someone they had overlooked because of their distance from the immediate circle of known associates. The storage unit offered the missing link. Harper watched as the forensic team collected samples, their careful swabs and bagging a testament to the progress of modern science. It was these methods that had brought them to this point, a combination of technological advances and dogged determination. As they worked, Harper received a call. The DNA analysis had provided a name, someone who had lived quietly on the fringes, yet whose connection to both the victim and the scene was now irrefutable. The connection had been obscured by layers of familial distance and the suspect's carefully constructed alibi. But science had unraveled it, piece by painstaking piece. The name lingered in the air, a ghost of the past now brought into sharp, undeniable focus. The realization hit Harper hard. The suspect had always been nearby, a fixture in the community, never once considered because of their outward normality. As the storm outside began to wane, a different kind of storm brewed within the team, a storm of anticipation and resolve. They had the breakthrough they needed, a path leading directly to the person who had evaded justice for so long. But as they prepared to confront this truth, Harper knew the hardest part was yet to come. The confrontation, the confession, and the unraveling of a life built on lies would test them all. The town would soon learn of the shadow that had loomed over them, hidden in plain sight. And as Harper prepared for what was to come, she knew that this revelation would not only bring justice, but also force a reckoning, one that would reshape the town's understanding of safety, trust, and the nature of evil itself. The storm had passed, leaving behind a damp chill that clung to the early morning air. Harper stood outside the precinct, the weight of the name they'd uncovered settling heavily upon her shoulders. It was a name she had heard countless times in casual conversations and community gatherings, yet never had it been uttered with suspicion or malice, until now. The suspect was Oliver Mackenzie, the town's beloved librarian, a man who had been a fixture in the community for decades. Known for his gentle demeanor and passion for books, Oliver had been a comforting presence for many, always ready with a kind word or a recommendation for the perfect read. He had been there at fundraisers and town hall meetings, his presence so ubiquitous it had become almost invisible. No one had ever looked twice at Oliver Mackenzie, and perhaps that was his greatest advantage. As Harper walked through the precinct doors, the team was already in motion, orchestrating the final steps to bring Oliver in. There was a tension in the air, a mixture of disbelief and determination. They had all known Oliver in some capacity. He was the kind of person who waved from his porch, who remembered your name and your favorite book. The thought that he could be involved in something so heinous was difficult to reconcile with the mild-mannered man they all thought they knew. The evidence, however, was irrefutable. The DNA from the storage unit had matched Oliver's, linking him to the scene with a certainty that technology alone could provide. It was a match that broke through the alibis and the facade, revealing a darker side to Oliver that no one had imagined. As the arrest team prepared, Harper considered the delicate balance they had to maintain. Oliver was well-liked and deeply embedded in the community. His arrest would send shockwaves through the town, challenging the assumptions people had made about the safety and trustworthiness of those around them. The plan was straightforward, but needed to be executed with precision. They would approach Oliver at the library, a place where he was most comfortable but also least likely to cause a scene. As Harper and her team drove towards the town center, the streets were just beginning to come alive with the morning routine. Shops opened their doors and people went about their day, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to descend. Arriving at the library, Harper took a moment to gather herself. The building stood as it always had, a haven of knowledge and tranquility, its red brick facade steadfast against the backdrop of the changing world. Inside, the soft rustle of pages and the quiet hum of the air conditioning were the only sounds that greeted them. Oliver was at his usual spot behind the circulation desk, a stack of books beside him waiting to be shelved. He looked up as they approached, his eyes meeting Harper's with the same warmth she had seen countless times before. But beneath that warmth, there was a flicker of something else. Recognition, perhaps, or the dawning realization that his carefully constructed world was about to unravel. "Oliver Mackenzie," Harper began, her voice steady yet laced with the gravity of the moment, "we need to talk." And in that moment, as the words hung in the air, the library seemed to hold its breath. The walls, heavy with the weight of stories untold, bore witness to the unfolding chapter in Oliver Mackenzie's life, a chapter that would soon reveal the truth behind the mask he wore and the secrets he had kept hidden for so long. Oliver's composure cracked for the briefest of seconds, a flicker of fear crossing his features before he regained his stoic mask. Harper and her team moved swiftly, explaining the gravity of the situation with a firmness that left no room for misinterpretation. As the library patrons watched in stunned silence, Oliver was led away, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor, a sound that would haunt the town for days to come. In the interrogation room, the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Oliver sat across from Harper, the fluorescent lights casting stark shadows across his face. The room was silent, save for the low hum of the recording equipment capturing every heartbeat of this pivotal moment. For hours, Harper and her colleagues presented the evidence, the DNA match, the timeline discrepancies, and the accounts that had been pieced together over years of painstaking investigation. Oliver listened, his expression inscrutable, a fortress of calm that began to crumble as the weight of his actions was laid bare. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Oliver spoke. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, as he began to unravel the tapestry of lies he had woven. He spoke of a moment of rage, an unplanned act that spiraled beyond his control, and the years spent living with the burden of his secret. As his confession unraveled, the room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as the truth emerged. The trial that followed captivated the entire nation, the courtroom filled with an air of both dread and relief. Oliver's confession left little room for doubt, and the jury delivered a swift verdict: guilty. The word echoed in the minds of those who had come to know him as a friend, a colleague, a trusted member of their community. Sentencing was swift, and as Oliver was led away, the reality of his actions settled over the town like a cloak. The community, once so tightly knit, now found itself grappling with a profound sense of betrayal and loss. Stores displayed signs of support for the victim's family, and candlelight vigils were held, illuminating the night with a shared sense of grief and solidarity. For the family of the victim, the verdict brought a bittersweet closure. Years of unanswered questions and silent suffering had finally been acknowledged, yet the absence of their loved one remained a void that could never be filled. They found solace in the support of their community, a community that had been irrevocably changed but was beginning the slow process of healing. As the dust settled, Harper reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. It was a reminder of the fragility of truth, of the masks people wear and the shadows that linger beneath. The case had been more than just a pursuit of justice. It was a testament to the power of perseverance and the enduring impact of memory. In the end, the story of Oliver Mackenzie and his actions became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the darkness that can exist in the most unexpected places. Yet amidst the pain and betrayal there was hope, a hope that justice, though delayed, could still be achieved, and that the light of truth could shine through even the darkest of times. The town of Oregon, scarred but resilient, moved forward, its people forever changed but united by the shared experience of uncovering the truth.